Welcome to the Vegan Family Kitchen podcast. I am thrilled today to have a visitor coming from very far away, all the way from Southern Australia. This is Leah Cooper. Hi, Leah.
Hi, Brigitte. How are you?
I'm doing great, even better since you are here. You are a yoga teacher, a whole food cook, and health and well-being enthusiast. You started your business that is called the Center of Ki, written Ki. You can see it on the video here in 2013, where you have been teaching weekly yoga classes, as well as hosting yoga retreats and leading seasonal cooking workshops. All of that in the Barossa Valley of South Australia for 10 years. This is fantastic. You can catch up with her and learn more on her YouTube channel, where she enables others to share her, to participate in her passions for health and well-being. And in 2021, she's also started a podcast called the Wellbeing Room. And you've probably already listened to the episodes where Leah and I had some great conversations about food out there. So it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for being with me today.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have our conversation today and see what comes out.
Yeah. So let's start by talking a little bit about what you do. And I have so much appreciation for the fact that you bring yoga and food together, because to me, it is obvious that those two things are closely intertwined, but I find, maybe it's just here in my little corner of North America, that often yoga is a standalone practice that doesn't seem to have that many connections, at least in its commercial version, to food and things. So tell me a little bit about what you do in the Center of Ki and how you bring those two aspects of life together.
Yeah, no, it's a really great point that you bring up about the food and the yoga, because you're right. It is very, in the mainstream yoga world, there isn't a lot of connection necessarily between food and yoga, especially at least in the Western society. Yoga is traditionally founded on, the Indian practices and Ayurvedic practices go hand in hand. But the yoga that I teach is actually from a Japanese lineage, which is also based from the traditional Indian yoga, but has had a Japanese twist on it. So food, I was actually very surprised when I first started yoga 25 odd years ago, how much of a connection there was when my teachers talking about the food side of things. They were promoting things like macrobiotics, which is something that I've fallen into as well. And it just made sense, because, if you're going to nourish your body, you want to do it on all levels, not just the physical of, moving your body. You want to actually nourish it with the food that you're eating. So I've been teaching, like you said, yoga here in the Barossa Valley for 10 years now. I've been teaching a bit longer than that, but when we first moved here 10 years ago, this is where I set up my school myself. And, I don't talk a lot about food necessarily in my yoga classes. I think it's a fine line. I feel people sometimes are receptive to that, but then aren't receptive. It's a fine line. People are very set in their ways when it comes to eating. I've noticed that just in general, people grew up a certain way, they ate a certain way, or they've discovered a new way of eating, or they're trying all these different fad diets that are out there. And so it can be a very touchy subject for people. And, my yoga teachers, they were just very forthright and outright about it. They just said, this is, the best way to eat. This is the way to healthy eating. This is the way to have a healthy body. And they didn't really, that was just part of who they were. I'm not maybe I think as I'm getting older and more experienced, that's coming easier. But in saying that, on my yoga retreats that I host, the food is a very important part of that. And I do all the cooking on those retreats myself. 3 meals a day. We have nourishing foods, and I kind of base it on the foods, the macrobiotic principles, and along with the seasons. And so I find that people come and I do warn them. I guess you got to warn people, like, we're going to be having this food, you're not going to be having coffee. There's no alcohol, there's not, cups of tea, endless cups of tea available. There's no snacks. It's kind of like just the 3 meals, and we're just going to do the yoga, and we're going to rest. And And they enjoy it. They enjoy getting this lovely bowl of food, brown rice and veggies and beans and tofu and things like that. And it's really like that. Then we get miso soup in the morning, and the food is really nourishing. Like, they feel very nourished when they come on retreat. They may feel a bit constipated, or they may have some other things that come up because they're not used to necessarily eating like that every day. So the body needs time to adjust. But the yoga does help with, releasing things. So it's a whole process. It's a whole cleansing process on retreat. So, we get up early. I try to have my retreats down by the beach. So we go for a joggle on the beach in the morning, and we jump in the water, and then we come back and do yoga and things like that. And then we have breakfast. So we don't actually eat until like 2 hours or so after we've gotten up. So there's that sort of fasting element, so that to me is what a retreat is about. And I'm going to have a little rant because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I see all these ads for these, yoga retreats around the place, locally or within Australia. And it's like, your morning yoga, and then, breakfast, and then we're going to go to a winery and have lunch at a winery or something, or, there's wine. And it's like, to me, it's like, that's not a retreat. That's like an indulgence weekend, like
it's a spa weekend.
Yeah. It's like, there's a difference, and I think if you're going to practice yoga and you actually want to get the benefits of a yoga retreat, then there isn't going to be alcohol. There isn't going to be meat. There isn't going to be cheese. It's going to be really simple, whole food, plant-based meals, and time to relax. And it's not about stimulating yourself with these sorts of other things, and I could rant a bit more, but I won't.
Thank you for saying that. And I get similar feelings sometimes when it comes to cooking, where there's such an insistence in the vegan cooking blogging world and things on like creating a really fancy food, for lack of a better word, food that has an explosion of flavors and everything, and sometimes simpler is better. And certainly in many circumstances of life, it just fits better with the energy that we have to prepare food. And I always feel like the downer saying those things. And I kind of get that same vibe from about the retreat, well, come to my retreat and we're going to be a little disciplined. And like, oh yeah, sounds great. But actually that is what feels good. That is often what we need to be centered. We get plenty of stimulation in daily life.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about going inward. It's a different journey. The first retreat I went on with my yoga teachers, I think it was I can't remember 7 days or 10 days, but it was at least 7 days. And I didn't realize when I signed up, it was called a half fasting retreat. And so, you get a tiny bowl, like a few tablespoons of miso soup in the morning, and, a spoon of brown rice or something. And like, it was just an amazing experience. Like, I was like, oh, okay, so we're not getting much food, but there was plenty to keep us like, it was yoga every day, 3 times a day. There was lots of exercise and movement and rest time. It was all balanced, and I came back just completely different. It just changed my life. It really changed my life. And I think if we allow those things, then we can have really big breakthroughs, especially for our health and well-being. So, yeah.
Often less is more.
Exactly.
At the end of the day.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, I was not planning on asking you this, but tell me about Japanese yoga. You've just told me about something I've never heard about.
Yeah. So I guess it's called Japanese yoga because so my teacher, he studied with a few different teachers, but one of his main teachers was Masahiro Oki. And so Oki, I think he was actually originally Korean born, but lived in Japan. I'm not too sure. So Masahiro Oki, Japanese, brought in the 5 elements and the principles of yin and yang into this style of yoga. And my teacher also learned with other Japanese instructors like Masanaga, who was a shiatsu teacher, therapist, as well as Zen shiatsu. And so there's all these sort of Japanese elements that have come in, and especially around the cooking and the food. So, like I said, miso soup, very Japanese, on retreats, on all the retreats I went on with my teachers, we'd always have miso soup for breakfast. And so that's something that I have in my daily life. Most days I'll, have miso soup or a version of miso soup for breakfast. Not every day, but, more often than not. And it's just very nourishing. It's that salty, umami way of waking up the digestive system in the morning. And so as far as Japanese yoga goes, for me, I like to call it therapeutic yoga as well. There's a therapy element of, we want to attain these beautiful asanas, whatever it is, tree pose, triangle pose, headstand, handstand, whatever. But the majority of people are actually pretty broken, especially in the Western world. And I was just thinking about this morning, a lot of people around here, especially, they learn vinyasa yoga or ashtanga yoga, and there's these really quite strong flowing sequences of yoga. And then you go to teach them in communities, whatever, and people really struggle. They're not strong enough. They're not flexible enough. It's a real struggle to get them to do these sorts of movements. So what I love about the Japanese yoga or the therapeutic yoga that I teach, it's actually just seeing where people are at and just giving them the foundations of the strength and the flexibility and the breath work and just the understanding of how their body can move. A lot of people who come to my classes, they say, after coming to yoga, my back is so much better. I don't have back pain anymore. Or, I feel my core, I can actually feel my core strength is getting better, whereas if they'd gone to another yoga class, they may not have had that experience. So I really focus on, and that's something my teachers also focus on, was this core strength and improving the back, because how many people have back pain? Like, seriously, it's like 80% of people. And it's just so easy to treat with just this really simple therapeutic exercises. I've got a playlist on my YouTube channel, and if you have back pain and you're listening or watching this podcast, please check it out. You'll be surprised how easy it is. And some of the exercises might be a bit strange. You're lying on your back and you're trying to squeeze your bottom off the floor and wiggle side to side or something. And it's like, oh, okay, I've not done that before. And it's going to be hard the first time you do it. It's going to feel strange, but the more you repeat them, of course, the easier it gets. And your pain will eventually, dissipate. So so it's a therapy. It involves the whole yin and yang principles and the 5 elements as well, that whole seasonal aspect, so fire in summer, that relates to the heart and the small intestine. So at the moment we're in summer here down south, so the focus is more perhaps on, opening the heart. You're getting the deep digestive system, the small intestine. That's this part of the body that, breaks down our food, all that lovely food that we're eating, and it turns it into blood. It releases all those nutrients into the bloodstream that then gets distributed through the body or goes to different places. So, and then in autumn, it's the metal element in the 5 elements. And so we focus more on the lungs and the large intestine. So the lungs is all about, obviously breathing, but also letting go. The large intestine is about absorption and then also releasing and letting go. So, and you notice in the nature outside of you in autumn time, the leaves are falling off the trees. The fruit is ripening and falling off if it hasn't already. And we're getting ourselves ready for winter. So, so autumn's about releasing and then shedding, and then the winter time's about stillness. The water element has this still quality. It's the kidneys and the bladder organs in the body. And, that's more to do with the spine and the nervous system as well. So, so each season has an organ pair related to it. It also has, the Japanese yoga also relates to the meridian body. So in, acupuncture or shiatsu, we look at the meridians in the body and how, that relates to each organ as well. So
what about
fascinating
spring?
stuff. Spring is the wood element. So that's the liver and gallbladder. So that's where people can get cranky, frustrated and angry, or it's all about direction, finding new direction, opportunities for growth. So, and liver and gallbladder are very deep in the body. So it's lots of twisting and side opening, like lovely side opening exercises that we can focus on in spring, because that's where the crankiness sits. Open the sides, it all goes. So, and it also, opening the sides helps lift the body up. So, this upward energy of spring. It's kind of like the morning, the sunrise. That's also the seasons and the elements are also reflected in the day. So morning, it's the spring, the uprising energy. Then you go to summer, the midday, where it's hot and bright, and then you go back to. We have the earth element as well, which is kind of called late summer, but traditionally the earth element sat in the middle. It was kind of like a four-pointed, so summer at the top, autumn, winter, spring, and earth, late summer sort of in the middle. But earth can actually happen in between all the seasons. It might only be a day, it might be a week, it might be 2 weeks. So the earth relates to the stomach and the spleen. So really, that initial part of digestion, and it's about nourishment. So how you nourish yourself, and the stomach meridian runs down the front of the body. So it's all about opening and arching, lots of arch poses to do with the earth element. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love how the practice evolves with the seasons and even the times of the day and how it's connected. Let's take this back to food.
Yeah.
And tell me about how the food pairs with the yoga. It's a food pairing. You're not going to pair it with wine. I can tell you that in advance. We're pairing it with the yoga. But so how do you see what the foundation of the kind of food that can nourish someone to enhance their life and enhance their yoga practice?
Okay.
And
how much time have you got? We might be here for
a little while.
No, that's okay. Yeah, there's so many different parts. So just backing onto that seasonal chat we just had. So in each season, so it's seasonal way of eating, makes sense. Eat what's in season, what's abundant at that time of year. And we're talking here from the plant kingdom mainly, of course. And so, for each season, there's specific foods that come up more often. So in summer, we've got an abundance of stone fruit. Well, this is in my climate. It depends. The climatic conditions also play a big element in this whole understanding. And it's based on that macrobiotic understanding. And we can talk more about that as well if you like. But so eating what's in your climatic zone in your season. For me, for instance, I live in South Australia. And in the Barossa Valley, it's quite a Mediterranean style climate. We have a lot of, stone fruits, cherries. They're kind of like the peak, and berries as well, strawberries and raspberries and things. They're kind of like the peak fruits at this time of year, and watermelon. And so that would be one of the key things that we can eat. Obviously, from my yoga teacher perspective and my yoga background, we don't tend to eat a lot of fruit because it can make you very soft and very sort of relaxed, and, can kind of also affect the digestive system, the large intestine. It can make it sort of expanded as well from all the, the fruit sugar that you eat. So we don't eat a lot of, in this style of yoga, my style of yoga, fruit isn't a massive player. A lot of people love fruit and it's beautiful, but so eating fruit seasonally. But then the vegetables that are more abundant this year. So those, big leafy greens. Now I can't think, but,
Tomatoes.
Salads.
Yeah.
Well, we don't actually do a lot of potatoes.
No, tomatoes. Sorry.
Tomatoes. Sorry. Yeah, tomato. You said tomato. I said tomato.
There you go.
I love it. Yeah, tomatoes. And, interestingly, from
and
a
capsicums, since you're in Australia.
Capsicums, that's right, or peppers. But, from again, a macrobiotic perspective, there's even nuances in the vegetable kingdom. So I there's this whole nightshade family, potatoes, tomatoes, capsicums, and what have you. So they're generally not recommended as to eat a whole lot of them unless you cook them a certain way. There's traditional ways of cooking tomatoes and capsicums. It's generally sort of longer cooking times, or you take all the seeds out, or, even things like chili and stuff like that. So there's certain ways to prepare the food to make it more optimal for your body, if you want to go down that path. So getting a bit off track, but yeah.
We were talking about what's the way to nourish yourself and nourish your practice with food. What does that look like?
So basically the basic principles is whole grains. So we've evolved to eat whole grains, our mouth, our teeth. We've got those grinding types of teeth. So as a society, as humans, and again, depending on your climate zone, if you live in the North Pole, you're not going to eat lots of grains because they don't grow there, but for most of us, grains is a staple, that carbohydrate, complex carbohydrate, unrefined as much as possible. So brown rice, oats, millet, wheat, corn, rye, all those things, and the principle is that 50% of your plate should be grain, basically, and the importance of chewing that grain, and chewing anything that you're eating is really important too. And then vegetables, of course, is a major component. Vegetables that are in season, perhaps not so much the tomatoes, potatoes, and capsicums, but definitely pumpkins, onions, cabbages, broccolis, cauliflowers, all those really standard ones. In winter we have more root vegetables, so carrots and parsnips and daikon radish, or all those downward growing vegetables. They're really good for the digestive system and grounding you into the earth. But also lots of leafy greens in the more spring, summer months as well. Autumn is like, the sweeter vegetables. So each season also has a flavor associated with it. So late summer is that really sweet flavor. So when when fruit starts to ripen in summer, it's usually quite bitter. The flavor of summer is this bitter or burnt flavor. But as the fruit ripens towards the end of summer, it gets that really sweet, juicy taste. And you can notice that from the start to the end of the season. And then in autumn, it's this pungent flavor. So it's, we're eating more things like, adding ginger to everything. Daikon radish is really good as well for the digestive system. Daikon radish helps dissolve fat in the body, depending on how it's cooked. And lots of pumpkins, those round, sweet vegetables, onions, fried onion and pumpkin, carrot, whatever, that kind of stuff. And then winter is a more salty flavor. So it's like your miso soups and, your beans, like azuki beans, which are a bit more dense. And, those cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower and things that grow more in those winter months. And then for spring, it's more the upward rising things like celery and sprouts, like actual sprouts. Like I like growing my own alfalfa sprouts, and so good. That's about the only thing I can grow. And those leafy greens, bok choys and things like that. So, and, it's just the seasons through the food. Yeah. And then of course, beans are a big part of that, tofu more in summer, tempeh more in winter. Beans, chickpeas and lentils basically are good any time of the year, I reckon. And like I mentioned already, azuki beans, perhaps more in winter, that type of thing. And, it's not fully plant-based necessarily, like the macrobiotic diet. You can basically, macrobiotics is you can eat anything ultimately when you're healthy. But there's this level of, so there's yin and yang, and then there's extreme yin and yang. So it's all about balance. So vegetables and grains kind of sit in the middle. They're like more neutral foods, but then you've got more vegetables some vegetables that are more yin. And it's all relative. There's yin vegetables, there's yang vegetables, but there's like more yin vegetables, like say tomatoes, they grow quickly, they're red, they're watery. Where if you've got more yang vegetables like carrots, they grow downwards, they're hard, they dig into the earth and they're solid. And then, there's so much. I could just talk forever. I need to organize my thoughts and put it into some blog posts perhaps. But so vegetables and grains, and then beans. And then, so going out from there, it's like things like fish. Like, so you got fish, you can have, a more scented type of fish would be the white fleshed fish. But then like a more red flesh, like salmon or tuna or something, that's a bit more extreme. And so the wider you go on either side, you have to balance out. So if you eat, fish or even animals like meat, like cows, pigs, whatever, and then you've got to balance that out on the other side with more yin. So animals are very yang, they're solid, they're growing, they're, alive, like people, like I don't want to compare animal, cows to people, but Yeah, but they're sentient beings.
People are animals too. Yeah,
exactly. And so if you're eating, a steak, then you might feel like having a glass of wine or lots of garlic with it, because garlic is also quite yin, I guess, in that respect. And when you eat a lot, if you might have a steak with this garlic sauce on it, and that's actually quite a balanced meal from a macrobiotic perspective, because it's balancing that out. But ideally, you don't want to be eating at the outside edges. You want to be eating at the inside, where the beans, vegetables, and grains live.
I think we're definitely not at risk of getting so extreme around here in the vegan family kitchen.
No, exactly. But if you have family or friends who maybe do, they go out for a steak and they're drinking a bottle of wine with it, and that's actually a balancing act. That's part of the process inside the body. It's the yin and the yang extremes.
Interesting.
It's like if you eat a bag of crisps, they're salty, then you might want to chug down a glass of orange juice afterwards. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Or together. Maybe that's why pop and chips are so prized as a combination.
I know. I find if I eat a stack of corn chips, and I'm going to be like, I want something fruity or sweet to balance it out.
It's, I think, in their involuntary ways, large food conglomerates might be onto some aspects of the yin and yang of food there.
And that's why in lots of processed foods, you've got sugar and you've got salt and fat to make it kind of balanced, but it's kind of not at the same time, because it's just so devoid of nutritional value.
Tell me a little bit more about how you see food as possibly a powerful healing tool or healing resource.
Absolutely. I think anything we put in our body has the ability to heal or harm us to some degree. And I was listening to another podcast just recently. This guy was talking about mitochondria and the cells and everything. And basically every degenerative chronic disease that exists in today's society is a result of people eating poorly. And it's great that science has finally, come to the party. Like, traditional medicine have known about this for centuries, millennia even. So it's quite interesting. So in macrobiotics, there's the healing diet, and it comes down to looking at the person as a whole and identifying, where they're deficient, where they have excess. So, you might have a disease that's caused by too much yin. So it might be, you've been eating fruit juices and I don't know, something very but you might be eating something very like yin for a while, and like even people who go on juice cleanses, if they do that indefinitely, they're going to get a yin disease if they don't stop and balance things out again. So basically, illness is caused from an excess of something or a deficiency of something. So you've either been putting something into yourself too much too often, and it's created this condition, or you haven't been putting enough of something in and it's created this condition. So what you need to do is bring it back to balance. So if you've been eating meat and cheese forever, very yang foods, you need to go on a yin healing diet. So maybe you do start eating more fruit, to balance that out, and vice versa, depending. Ideally, strict macrobiotic healing diet, if you just wanted to go the nuts and bolts, it's kind of like brown rice and miso soup 3 times a day, because those foods are so neutral. But if you do have these excesses, then you've got to try and balance them out, bring them back. And then, so you go on a healing diet for a certain amount of time, and it's really down to the individual looking at what the condition is. And then once you get to this state of balance, then you can start to sort of go a little bit wider, test a few different vegetables, test a few different things. But ultimately, for me, from my own personal experience, if I ever feeling sick, or which doesn't happen very often anymore, touch wood, thank goodness, I just go straight back to miso soup and brown rice for a couple of days, and then my body resets and I'm good to go. So, I mean, like for instance, I had a thyroid condition when my daughter was 2, so about 12 years ago now. I was hypothyroid, I had a thyroid nodule growing as well, so precancerous kind of stuff. And I'd been eating lots of good food, but it was all like cooked. Like I never hardly ever ate salads or anything like that, and wasn't really, I was a mum, I was a full-time employee, I was a wife, I was running a house, all these things. It just all built up, and I got sick. And so I went to a doctor. She was actually a vegan, raw vegan, this doctor, and so
Wow.
so she was prescribing green juices and raw food, and I was like, okay. And I actually went to my macrobiotic teacher in Sydney at the time, and I said, look, I've got this condition. My doctor's recommended this. What are your thoughts? And he actually mostly agreed with what she had recommended, like those, getting more greens into me, getting more fruit and salads and stuff like that, because I'd been eating just really cooked foods like stews and casseroles and things, and hadn't had the fresh stuff much. So a more yin diet I was needed to have. But also more yin activity. So I was, working, doing this, mum, etc., employee, and so I had to actually take time out for myself to do more yoga, because I wasn't really practicing much at that point in time. With a 2-year-old, it's hard to get much done. So I was, making sure I went to yoga now twice a week, and just not trying to do 100 things on the weekend because that's the only time I've got. And the doctor, she had prescribed me to take thyroid medication, but I had said, look, give me a month. I just want to see if I can sort it out myself first. If it doesn't happen, if my levels are still off the charts, then we'll go there. And so with, more yoga, a better diet, a more yin diet, more yin activity, and just, taking it easy, doing specific yoga stretches or poses for the thyroid as well to stimulate or to calm the thyroid. That really helped. And I went to get my results the next time, and it kind of leveled out. It wasn't as intense. She was like, okay, well, you don't need the medication, but you still need to. I had to take iron and vitamin B and vitamin D for a little while, and I just had to keep monitoring my thyroid for the next couple of years. But it seems fine now. I haven't had a relapse. So just the way I've used diet in that instance to, I guess, not necessarily, I don't know if I've cured myself, but just to overcome that health challenge.
It helped for sure.
Yeah, it helped for sure. Yeah.
What about sweet potatoes, which are not potatoes?
No, sweet potatoes okay in moderation. I love sweet potato. It's like I didn't know what a sweet potato was until I started yoga. Let's put it that way. Like I'd never seen one or eaten one before. And then my yoga teacher, she was like, I've got this, I remember we did this weekend, sort of like, it was like kind of like a weekend yoga thing, Women's Day. And, we did foot massages for each other. And then they cooked us this amazing lunch and had this like sweet potato and cashew dish. And I was like, oh my God, like, what is this?
Yum.
And only the orange ones. I don't like any other ones. I just like the orange
they're
ones.
They're extremely nutritious, because I hear you talk of miso soup and brown rice. And I just want to add a few slices of roasted sweet potato, the orange one, and maybe a handful of massaged kale with the miso dressing. Yeah, and I'm like, that's a pretty, I guess you would add some legumes, a handful of chickpeas or some beans, and
absolutely,
you've got a pretty darn good meal.
Totally.
I'm curious about miso soup for breakfast. Well, let's backtrack and tell me what makes a good miso soup, because I do make a lot of miso soup myself, but I fear that I'm an imposter. Obviously I don't use fish flakes and things like that.
No, I don't either. No.
So tell me what's the essence of a good miso soup?
The essence of a good miso soup. Well, I like to keep mine fairly simple. Some days, I make a big vegetable stock. So I get my stock, keep all my onion skins and carrot ends and whatever, just all those bits of veggies that are really good for making a stock. So I always make a stock, like usually once a week. I throw in some dried shiitake mushrooms and maybe some kombu seaweed or kelp, seaweed. Make a big pot, strain it off, keep the mushrooms. And so my very basic miso soup would be taking some of that veggie broth, adding some either grated or finely chopped ginger to it.
Oh, yes.
A dash of tamari or shoyu, depending on what you've got in your cupboard, and just heating that up, maybe chopping up one of those mushrooms that you had in the stock, slice that up, throw it in, and add a teaspoon of miso as you're reheating it. or even half a teaspoon, depending on your salt.
Per cup water, per cup broth kind of thing.
Yeah. I always edge on the less, like maybe half a teaspoon, but up to a teaspoon per person. Add that. You want the miso to dissolve in the broth so that it starts to float around. You get those little swirly patterns in the broth, and then put it in a bowl or a cup and just some finely sliced spring onion on top, and that is your most basic miso soup. The more advanced version is I'll get a pot and I'll slice some onion, fry the onion in some good sesame oil or sunflower oil. Then I, julienne some carrot and daikon radish, or you can cube it or whatever, however you want to chop it up, really. Chop it however you like. Throw that in with the onion, saute it off. You could add things like, you could add celery, depending what's in season, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, whatever. And then throw in your veggie stock, bring that up to heat so that the veggies cook in the broth. After a little while, then you add grated ginger to it. Always have to add the ginger to your miso. And then I actually also usually add wakame seaweed. So wakame is kind of like the more not flaky, but stringy. I don't know. Yeah.
Stringy. I think that's a good way to describe it compared to the sheets of kombu kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So add some wakame, which has been pre-soaked. I always pre-soak the seaweed. I don't usually add the soaking water because it's quite salty and I don't know, might have residue on it. So chop up the seaweed, throw it in. And then right at the end is where so I'll either if I'm going to use that pot for a few days, I won't even add the miso to it. I'll as I reheat the soup, I'll then add the miso, like I just described in the previous step. But if, say, you were going to serve that soup up to your family that night, you would then add your miso. You'd like ladle out some of the stock from the soup in a measuring cup, then add your miso, like 1 teaspoon per person or per serve. I always, like I said, air for less to start with because you can't take the salt out once it's in. Stir in your miso, dissolve it, pour it back in, stir it through, let it heat it, you don't want to boil it. Once you've added the ginger and the miso, you don't want the soup to boil because ginger, once it's boiled, it kind of deactivates it. And same with miso, it's a living thing. You don't want to boil the crap out of it. It'll go, So
I knew that I was going to ask you for miso. I had this impression, but I did not know for ginger.
Yeah. So, I mean, the ginger, I guess the enzymatic quality of it, you don't want to lose that. I mean, like you can, like if you're like with the pumpkin soup, for instance, I would I would saute my onion and my ginger and garlic, whatever, at the start, and then I'd add the stock and the pumpkin, and then I would actually boil it then. That's okay. But for like a healing soup thing, you don't want the ginger to boil.
What about adding, because my kids love miso soup, but I think what they really like is the tofu in the miso soup. Because here we tend to put medium or, like silky cubes of tofu in there. Is
totally. Yeah, that's great.
Acceptable?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you can put whatever you want in it, really. And so that would be like just a really simple breakfast. So I keep my pot in the fridge. I just ladle out what I want each day, heat it up, add my miso, throw some spring onion on the top at the end. The spring onion is good as well because that helps activate. It's like a complete thing, like you've got the ginger, you've got the seaweed, you've got the miso, and then you've got the spring onion, and it's just this package deal. It's just a bomb of goodness. So especially for your like enzymes in your stomach and stuff like that. So
I love it. It sounds absolutely wonderful. Tell me if anyone, wants to fly to Australia and join one of your retreats, how would they get a hold of you? And more generally, what other kinds of programs do you offer? I know you've been offering some plant-based cooking workshops. So tell me a little bit about what you do in those.
Yeah, so everything's kind of in-house at the moment. I haven't, like you've got this amazing online stuff. One day, that's my goal. You're my ideal.
That's very kind. It's very kind. See, I wish I was doing more in-person things. I miss the interaction. Before pre-pandemic, we were having some really fun in-person cooking club meetings, and that was so good.
Would be fun.
We're mostly over it, kind of thing, or just lost hope of really being able to contain things. So, but we haven't been able to put those back on the road, so I'm happy for you that you're having in-person retreats.
So I only really hold one retreat a year. I haven't actually set a date for this year. It's always a struggle to find venues that I want to use. So that's usually later in the year anyway, sort of around October. As far as my cooking workshops, I'm trying to do more like a one per season at the moment. So at the moment, I've got the summer one coming up. It's going to be more late summer by the time it happens in February, but that's just how it goes with programming and people's availability. On my YouTube channel, I do have some cooking videos. I have like how to make miso soup on there. So if people want to have a look at that, I've even got how to cook brown rice, but I'm sure most of your audience already know how to do that. I actually do the absorption method, which is different to the method that you describe in your book. But that's just what my teachers taught me. And I just find it's like set and forget and turn it off when it's done. So that's what I love. And
in most places, I think that's a fine thing to do. I think in North America, a lot of the rice comes from places where they used to grow cotton. Which is why we have the arsenic contamination problem.
Yeah, okay. Well,
which is not so much the case in Asia, I think.
So. Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess the rice I cook is grown in Australia, but, I do always rinse the rice 3 or 4 times before I cook it. Sometimes I'll even soak it overnight before I cook it and then rinse it again. That kind of also helps activate or sprout the rice.
Totally.
Yeah, so I get what you're saying. Yeah, you've got to get the nasty things out. And my podcast, that's the other thing I'm working on. So yeah, I mean, YouTube is really what I'm trying to grow my audience on. And I'm posting, I started off just doing yoga videos on there. So I've got quite a few yoga videos. I've got different playlists. I've got different time lengths, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 45-minute classes there. And like I mentioned, the cooking videos, but I'm also doing a lot of just health and well-being. Like you said in the intro, I'm a health and well-being enthusiast. And I think that's kind of the best way to describe me at the moment. I'm just talking about different health and well-being things that are pertinent that I think my audience might be interested in. The other day I did a short video about napping, because that kind of has changed my life. So just sharing those bits and pieces with people, I think that's just where I'm at the moment. So yeah, I'm hoping to get more stuff online eventually, and maybe this year that might happen. I'm actually keen to do some webinars on macrobiotics more specifically and help educate people and answer the questions about macrobiotics, because I think, it can be kind of like, oh, macrobiotics, that's just brown rice and miso soup. And I know I did just say that, but it's so much more than that. There's a whole philosophy about, the creation of the universe and our place in the universe and how we evolved. And it's just the energy, and there's like so like macro, there've been books written about it, massive books about it. And, I've studied it for many years and I just find it fascinating. It just so resonates with me. And I would like to share that with more people too.
I very much look forward to that. And I encourage everyone to, I think, go to the center of Key to get the access to you in so many ways. So I will put this in the notes at the bottom, but the center of key.co.au, correct?
It's .com.au actually.
.com.au. Add that.
And
that
center is spelled the English way, CENTRE, not CTER, which is the American. So that's just to confuse everyone. I didn't realize that until I met George Cow, our coach, and he's like, oh, maybe I should probably register the center name and then direct it to that one. That's a good point.
Sounds like a good idea, but I'll have it in the notes and people can just click it to get a hold of you. And I hope that they will head to your YouTube channel and do some healing, stretchings, and yoga and strengthening with you. That sounds like a great antidote to a lot of what ails us in our excessively complicated and sedentary Western life, for sure.
Yeah. Overindulgent.
Thank you.
Too.
Thank you so much, Leah, for being with me today. And let's meet again soon and cook. I wish so much we could get together to cook. That would be so much fun. We'll work on this.
We'll work on that. Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks so much, Brigitte.
Thank you.